we're going to be going over the top 10 weapons in Warframe. I haven't done this one in a while. This video will be a little different from my previous ones. We're going over all the different weapon types. However, I didn't want this list to just be incarnate weapons, so I have divided it accordingly under each weapon type. There will be one incarnate, one Kuva or Tenet, and one normal weapon. This is incredibly tough to sort all of the weapons into 10, so this is based on my personal opinion. Remember that. Let me know your favorite weapons in the comments below and I will make a part 2. Also, keep watching till the end for some bonus weapons. But first, before we go into the list, this video is sponsored by Stalcraft. Ever wanted to be stuck in the zone hunting for loot while surviving against other players? Stalcraft has brought so many new things to the game. You as a player will take part in a large-scale storyline, despite being in the harsh conditions of the northern locations. There is a new faction amongst the 4 existing factions, which is my personal favorite, the amazing freedom-loving Dawn. Faction wars are in Stalcraft 2. There is a new system for clan wars and outposts in newly designed locations made specifically for team PvP activities. So if you're a fan of huge intense PvP faction wars, then Stalcraft has that for you. Stalcraft has added a loot spawn system on locations that will increase players' interest in exploring the vast zone. Personal shelters, bases for you to rest after tough battles. Here you can craft your necessities like ammunition and medical kits. You can customize and decorate your entire shelter. Stalcraft has also overhauled their graphics engine, bringing new levels of detail, new lighting, and a new weather system to pair with it. New animations to make your gameplay feel more realistic and fluid, adding more depth and detail to your visual experience. NPCs have been overhauled and are now a lot smarter, learning how to hide behind covers and jump off obstacles. There is a welcome bonus for new players. Use my code WarframeFlo to claim this new bundle, which gives you a bunch of free stuff and a free jumpsuit as well. This bonus is available for both new players and players who haven't logged in the game for a long time. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in my description and I will see you all in the zone. First on the list for primary weapons is the Cedo. I pretty much always add the Cedo on these lists because it's just that good. It's an MR8 weapon that can be obtained from Father in Deimos. However, you can just buy the pass from other players for super cheap if you don't want to farm all that standing. For a weapon this low of an MR requirement, it can carry you straight into the late steel path. It's also an incredibly satisfying weapon to use as it's a glaive launcher / shotgun. Its alternate fire spits out a glaive that primes enemies with a bunch of status effects. It also has a built-in condition overload. You deal 60% bonus damage per unique status effect on targets. The glaive will apply toxin, cold, electricity, heat, and blast, and will also apply the status effects that you mod for. Here is the main build that I use, and here is a budget version as well. And then we have an even more budget build for those of you who want to try it out and not invest into it too much. It's an incredibly fun, active, and powerful shotgun that is 100% worth getting. You won't regret it. And it's also a very good primer if you want to use a secondary with condition overload type mods. The Tenet Glaxion is one of the new Tenet weapons that has been added to the list, and I have to say it is brilliant. It's like a budget turret incarnate in a sense, a more accessible one if you could say that, and it holds up incredibly well. The nice thing is once you complete the War Within and the Call of Tempestoria questline, you can farm Tenet and Kuva weapons no matter your MR requirement. The Tenet Glaxion is an upgrade from the base version and it has a beam that chains to nearby enemies. And of course, the nice thing is, well, it's a Tenet weapon, which means you get to add a progenitor element onto it as well. When it comes to the Tenet Glaxion, it has innate cold, so you can go for toxin progenitor to make it viral if you want to go that route. You can also go for heat so that you can get innate blast, or you can go magnetic. Magnetic is incredibly powerful at the moment as it's very strong against corpus and overguarded units. You can build around it for Grineer enemies if you'd like, as this weapon will do enough damage with all of your stacks up. I unfortunately farmed the wrong progenitor. I got radiation, which is, it's not the best. I should have farmed another one. The builds will differ depending on the progenitor you use. Here is a generic viral hunter munitions build, a corrosive blast setup, which is super fun, but does heavily rely on your stacks to do big boy damage. If you run magnetic, you can run any other element of choice that you so desire. However, the main thing is multi-shot, galvanized aptitude, your element, crit mods, and then you can also go for fire rate as well. Play around. Remember, you don't need to follow the builds exactly in this video, and I would also suggest with these builds running arcane acceleration on your Warframe to increase your fire rate. If you are a newer player, this is what the budget version looks like. This will also alter depending on your element you put on the weapon. Overall, it's a really powerful weapon that is really fun to play as well. You can also use this while you farm your turret incarnate. For the Kuva weapon on this list, we have the Kuva Quartakk. Now hold on now. Before you bash it, give it a try. Me personally, I find this a very underrated weapon that is often overlooked. It has two fire modes. An auto fire when you hip fire, and when you ADS it will do a burst fire which shoots out 4 rounds at a time. Now the burst fire does a ton of damage when paired with slash from hunting munitions. You will also do more crit damage with the burst fire. Now it may not be the best group clearer, but with punch through it will help with this issue. Where this weapon shines is against tougher targets, like Demolists and Eximus units. When built correctly, this weapon is actually incredibly strong and is really useful in the late star chart throughout Steel Path. It's a great all-rounder weapon that offers you both. You can also jimmy the whole ADS system with this gun by firing from the hip and then aiming while shooting. It will then continue shooting in auto mode. However, if you stop while aiming and then shoot again, it will switch to the burst fire mode. This is handy if you don't like hip firing the whole time, and it's good to use the auto fire for easy enemies and then just burst for the big tough boys. Here is the main build here that I run, and if you would like a budget version, this is what you can run as well. Trust me, don't bash it until you try it, it's really good. For the Incarnon choice on this list for primaries, I went for the Burston Incarnon. The Burston Incarnon is by far my favorite weapon and my favorite Incarnon. It does more than enough damage, it can take you to level cap, and it has a 600 round mag, and it's basically an A10 Warthog in your hands. It's so satisfying to use and does red crits as well as feed your primitive brain. Its fire rate is amazing, and the evolutions boost this weapon's crit by a large amount. The nice thing about the Burston is the status chance is also really high, so modding this weapon for any element is really good and works really well with this weapon, so it is incredibly flexible to build. I usually go for a corrosive heat build which looks like this, and this is the main setup that I use, but again you can mod for any element that you want, whether that's fire or slash, or you can go magnetic for corpus, it doesn't matter. Here is the budget version for those of you who don't want to invest a ton of form into the weapon. You will not regret getting the Burston Incarnon. It's incredibly powerful and it's so much fun. It never gets old. I love using this weapon. And that concludes the primary weapons for this list. If you could smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Thank you so much. And also join the Discord if you want to hang out. Link will be in the description below. We now move on to the secondaries. First on this list is the Kuva Nukor. I can't not put it on this list. It's the perfect, most versatile secondary in Warframe. The Kuva Nukor is a beam weapon that also chains to nearby enemies. It has very high crit multiplier and status chance, and this pistol is an amazing primer as well as an amazing damage dealer. For the progenitor, I would recommend running heat for the damage version, or you can actually simply just run magnetic because it's been reworked, and magnetic is usually used for the primer. It can now be used for the damage build too. It's very strong against shielded and overguarded enemies. It's the perfect mid to late game pistol for you that kills multiple enemies at once. It's just that good. The Kuva Nukor also does innate radiation and has a unique status effect called microwave, which expands enemies' limbs. It's actually really funny, to be honest. This is the main build for priming, which is super useful, and this is the damage build for heat. I also have a viral heat setup which is so strong that shreds through anything with the amount of heat procs that it applies. For those who want a budget version, here is a super cheap setup for you. The Kuva Nukor is just a standard, a must-have. I would highly recommend giving it a try. Up next, we have the Epitaph, a similar weapon as well in terms of the Nukor, a primer and an absolute monster of a damage dealer. The Epitaph's single target damage is simply disgusting. I have recently made a guide on this weapon, so go and check that out as I go in detail how to do huge amounts of damage. The Epitaph is an MR8 weapon that can be obtained through Railjack, specifically through Voidstorm missions in Earth, Venus, and Saturn. However, the parts are tradable, so you can buy the parts instead if you don't enjoy Railjack. The Epitaph has two fire modes, a tap fire that does an AoE explosion, applying many status effects, and the hold fire which releases a single projectile that does a huge amount of damage. It is a demon against tough targets, and this gun easily does millions of damage even with a budget build. I've always looked at this weapon as just a primer, when in reality it simply can do both, comfortably. For the main primer setup, we use this, and for a damage setup, we would use this. All you do for the damage is tap fire a few times to prime the enemies with status effects, and then hold fire to literally just obliterate them to oblivion. Here is a budget setup for those who want to do a damage setup and don't want to invest too much former. Trust me, this gun will carry you with ease and will shred through everything it comes across. Besides, it's super fun and satisfying to play, and it doesn't require too much MR. You don't want to miss this weapon, trust me. The Furis Incarnate, an absolute powerhouse for heat damage. I chose the Furis over the Dual Toxicus Incarnate because I personally find the Furis more satisfying to play. The Incarnate form makes it into a beamish weapon, kind of like the Clamoro Prism for amps, and this thing just melts enemies with the amount of heat damage it does. A pure heat Furis is a force to be reckoned with, it's beautiful. You can also mod it for corrosive if you'd like, that would work too, but I went for flat heat. Here is the main build that I use for the Furis, and of course, here is the budget version. I think this weapon speaks for itself, the Incarnate form is busted and just great overall. Definitely worth farming in Deviri for it. That concludes the secondaries for this video. For the melees, it was tough, I'm not going to lie. There are so many melees in this game that are actually really good, so to put them as a top 3, it's so difficult, and I didn't put a Kuva or Tenet weapon here because, again, there are just so many. But from my personal experience, the Praedos is by far one of the most important melees to have for any Warframe player. And that is because not only does this weapon do considerable damage, its evolutions grant you extra movement speed as well as parkour velocity. I pretty much use the Praedos all the time when I'm not using my melee, because why not? I'm not going to use it anyway, so you may as well gain the extra movement. It is so handy and so much fun to run. Not only that, should you decide to run this weapon as a melee as well, the Praedos does a lot of damage, so it can do both. It's a tonfer, so it has a really nice stance that applies many slash procs. The main build that I use is this one here, and for the budget version, you can use this. The Praedos is an MR14 weapon obtained from Cavalera in the Zaramon. It's a bit of a late game weapon, but worth getting nonetheless. It's such a handy weapon to have for both uses, especially if you're not the biggest melee player, it's the perfect utility weapon. Moving on to Harmony, a new melee that has been added, and I added this simply because of its amazing unique trait, Harmonic Resonance. It allows you to condense all of your status effects that deal damage over time into a single instance when you heavy attack. Also, when you heavy attack, it will increase your status duration by 30%, which further increases this damage. When this weapon is built correctly, you literally do millions and millions of damage, especially when you pair this weapon with melee afflictions. It's honestly overkill, but where this weapon shines is if you want to literally obliterate tougher targets in Warframe. Nothing will stand in your way when using Harmony, it is amazing. Here is the main setup that I use, and here is a melee influence setup, and here is a budget setup. To use it, it's really easy, just melee a few times after you've stacked up your slash procs, just heavy attack and the enemy will be dead. Super fun, I highly recommend using this melee. For the last weapon on this list, we go for the Dual Ichor Incarnate. I think the Dual Ichors still shine in terms of Incarnate weapons for melees. Its Incarnate form creates a toxin cloud when you kill enemies, and just spreads to nearby enemies as they die. You can even pair it with melee influence and it's even more powerful. This is one of the nicest AoE melee clearers and just feels amazing to use. One of the top melees right now, and this weapon is particularly broken with Siren and pairing it with Toxic Lash. I use this build here for my general Steel Path gameplay, and here is the budget version. I don't have much more to say about the Dual Ichors, they are just simply broken. And that concludes the list, but I'm not done. Time for some bonus weapons. These are just a few weapons that I find to be particularly fun. The Convectrix, a status hose applying an insane amount of slash procs, really satisfying to use, and if you mod it for any damage over time status effects, it's even more fun because it already applies so many slash procs. The Mitre is also amazing with its homing projectiles in the Incarnate form, doing tons of damage. The Occucore is ridiculously strong, but does require you to have an expensive mod called Sentient Surge. The Lex Incarnate hits like a truck and does millions of bleed ticks from the Incarnate form. The only downside is the low ammo pool and slow fire rate. The Guandao Prime, buffed with attack speed, is just really funny and has many spinny blades. The Anku Incarnate is just a solid choice when it comes to slash procs because of the evolutions. The Sampotes paired with Siren and the heavy slam attacks is just pure neuron activation. Alright, that was a lot of weapons, but that concludes the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos. Also, follow me on Twitch so you know when I go live. As always, a huge thank you to all of our amazing channel members, and a special thank you to Joshua, Villa, Hayden, Trum, Shakiro, Darwin, Gilbert, Ayrton Yard, Tythrax, and King Wonderbread. I cannot thank you all enough. I will see you all in the next one.